Have you ever sat outside, completely still, and noticed that the birds around you suddenly fell silent? Maybe you were in your garden, on a quiet trail, or just looking out the window. Everything felt calm. The sparrows were chattering, a robin was singing somewhere nearby, and then, in the space of a breath, all that sound just stopped. Not slowly, not fading, but instantly, like a wave had passed through the air that you couldn't feel. You probably looked around. You scanned the trees, the sky, the edges of the hedge, and for a moment there was nothing. Everything looked the same. The light hadn't changed. The air was still warm. You felt a small ripple of curiosity, maybe even unease, but you couldn't find anything wrong. Then, maybe 30 seconds later, a cat stepped out from behind the shed, or a hawk drifted silently overhead, or a stranger walked around the corner of the path, still too far for you to have heard their footsteps. By the time you noticed, the birds had already known, and they had already reacted. That small, almost invisible moment, that gap between their awareness and yours, is what we're going to explore together today. Not with urgency, not with drama, but with a gentle curiosity. Because hidden inside that tiny silence is something deeply meaningful about how birds see the world, and maybe about how we have forgotten to see it ourselves. Welcome to Wild Perception. Most people think of birds as background music, a natural soundtrack that rises and falls without demanding our attention. But birds are not passive. They are not simply decorating the world with sound. They are reading it, constantly, carefully, and far faster than we ever could. When a garden falls quiet, it's not random, it's a decision. A wave of tiny, lightning-fast decisions made by dozens of small, bright-eyed creatures who have just detected something that hasn't reached you yet. And if you learn to notice these silences, to notice the way a flock shifts direction before a storm, or the way a blackbird tilts its head long before the soil yields a worm, you begin to realize that you are living inside a layer of awareness that has always been there, just beyond your senses. Let's start with something very simple: sound. Birds don't hear the way we do. Their hearing is tuned to the faintest disturbances, a soft rustle in dry leaves, the nearly silent beat of an owl's wing, the shift in air pressure that comes when something large moves nearby. A crow can hear the distant call of another crow from half a mile away and understand instantly whether that call means food, danger, or just an invitation to gather. What sounds like a simple caw to us is an entire sentence to them, and they don't need to think about it. It's immediate, instinctive, present. So when you were sitting there in the garden and the robin stopped singing, it wasn't because it saw the cat, it was because it heard with absolute precision the almost silent footfall of soft paws on grass. A sound so subtle your ears simply filtered it out as nothing. But to the robin, that tiny shift in the texture of the world was as loud as a shout. And it didn't just hear it, it responded. It placed itself in safety before its brain even consciously registered the threat. Now let's go a little deeper. Beyond sound, there is sight. A bird's eyesight is one of the most extraordinary sensing systems in the natural world. They see more frames per second than we do. Where you see a smooth, continuous motion, they see the individual wing beats of an insect. They see the micro flicker of a shadow that passes too quickly for your brain to catch. A hawk circling high above might just be a speck to you, but to a sparrow on the ground, that speck is moving with a distinct, recognizable rhythm that triggers an ancient alarm. The sparrow doesn't need to identify the species, it doesn't need to calculate distance or intent, it just feels the pattern and it disappears into the hedge.
This is why sometimes you'll see a flock of starlings erupt into the sky all at once, twisting and turning in perfect unison without any visible cause. From the ground, it looks like magic, but up there, in their world, one bird felt the slight change in air pressure caused by a peregrine falcon beginning its stoop. That one bird turned, and within milliseconds, the entire flock turned with it. Not because they saw the falcon, but because they were deeply, intimately connected to the movement of the bird beside them. They have trained their awareness to ride the edge of the present moment in a way that makes our own attention feel like a slow, sleepy blink. And that brings us to something more subtle, something that feels almost like a bridge between their world and ours. Birds read body language. Not just the body language of other birds, but yours as well. If you spend time regularly in the same outdoor space, a balcony, a park bench, a quiet corner of a garden, the local birds will eventually learn who you are. They'll learn the shape of your silhouette, the rhythm of your walk, the way you breathe when you're still. And they will decide over time whether you are something to be ignored or something to be watched. When you arrive, they don't just see human, they see you, the specific you, and they react accordingly. I've experienced this myself many times. There is a bench I often sit on near a small patch of woodland. When I first started visiting, the birds would fall silent the moment I appeared. They would flick nervously into the branches and wait. But after weeks of sitting quietly, without sudden movements, without staring directly at them, something shifted. One morning I arrived, and the robin who lived in the bramble did not fly away. It stayed. It watched me for a moment, tilted its head in that curious, intelligent way robins have, and then went back to foraging. It had recognized that my presence was not a threat, and in that moment I wasn't just an observer anymore. I had been accepted into their awareness on their terms.
That's the thing about birds. They don't just react to predators and weather. They react to energy, to intention, to the quiet, almost invisible signals that we give off without even knowing it. If you approach the world with agitation, with hurried footsteps and a restless gaze, the birds will vanish before you even reach the gate. But if you approach with stillness, with softness, they will stay. And in staying, they offer you something rare, the feeling that you belong to that place, not as a visitor, but as a part of it. There's another layer, too, that many people never consider. Birds are deeply attuned to changes in the atmosphere. They feel storms coming long before the sky darkens. They detect shifts in barometric pressure, changes in wind direction, even the subtle drop in temperature that precedes rain. Hours before a thunderstorm, you might notice the garden go unusually quiet, or see birds feeding frantically, as if they know time is running out. They do know. Their bodies are sensitive instruments, connected to the Earth's rhythms in a way that our modern lives have mostly numbed. We check our phones for the weather. They feel it in their bones. And if you think about it, that's really what all of this is pointing toward. Birds react before you notice something around you because they are not separate from their environment. They are woven into it. They don't observe nature from a distance. They are inside it always, listening with their whole bodies, feeling every ripple of change as it moves through the air, the ground, the light. There is no gap between their senses and the world, no constant internal chatter, no mental filter, no distraction, just presence, pure, open, unwavering presence. We, on the other hand, have learned to live inside our heads. We walk through a forest thinking about the past. We sit on a bench while scrolling through our thoughts about the future. The birds are right there, right now, completely alive to the moment, and because of that, they see the thing we miss, they hear the thing we overlook, they feel the change before it reaches us, not because they are magical, but because they are paying attention in a way we have mostly forgotten how to do.
This isn't a judgment, it's an invitation, because that awareness is still inside us somewhere. You can feel it waking up when you sit quietly for long enough, when you let your own mind settle and your senses open. You start to notice things you would normally miss. The slight change in bird calls when a fox is moving through the undergrowth, the way the wind shifts just before a cloud covers the sun, the feeling deep in your chest that something is about to happen before you can name it.
People who spend a lot of time in wild places often describe this as a kind of sixth sense, a quiet knowing. But I believe it's simply the same awareness the birds have, still flickering gently inside us. We've just buried it under layers of noise and hurry. And the birds, in their small, unassuming way, are reminding us that it's still there. I think that's why we feel something stir inside us when we witness that sudden silence I described at the beginning. It's not just curiosity, it's recognition. Some ancient part of us remembers that we were once creatures of the wild too, creatures who had to listen, who had to notice, who had to feel the world with this kind of depth just to survive. And when the birds fall quiet, a faint echo of that old alertness flickers awake inside us. For a moment, we stop thinking. We just listen, and in that listening, we become a little more alive. Maybe this is one of the quiet gifts birds offer us, over and over again, without asking for anything in return. They give us the chance to step outside our own minds and into the living, breathing world. They show us that awareness isn't just a skill, it's a way of belonging, a form of love even, attention given freely to the small details of existence, the twitch of a leaf, the weight of a silent sky, the subtle shift that means a sparrowhawk is near. So the next time you find yourself sitting somewhere quiet and the birds around you suddenly stop singing, don't just look for the cause. Stay still, listen. Feel your own presence blending with theirs. Notice the quality of the silence. Notice the way your own heart rate changes. And ask yourself not just what the birds are reacting to, but what you might be able to sense too, if you let yourself be that open. Because maybe it wasn't just a noise that made them fall silent. Maybe it was a change in the world that you almost felt somewhere behind your ribs before your mind could explain it. And maybe, in that tiny suspended moment, you and the birds were sharing the same thing after all, a deep, unspoken connection to the living earth and to each other. Thank you for sharing this quiet moment with me. If you've ever had an experience where it felt like the birds knew something you didn't, or if there is a particular bird that has felt like a small companion to you in your own life, I would love to hear about it in the comments. These small, personal connections are what make this channel feel like a shared, gentle space. As always, take care, stay curious, and keep noticing the small silences. There is so much more happening there than we ever imagine.